Hello, everyone. Hello, good evening. Nice to have you all. Thank you for joining me on this special 4 evening talk on general Buddhist thought. We started last Friday on the general concept of what constitutes Buddhist thought in general. From tonight onwards, I will go a little bit more specifically on some of the fundamental theoretical framework of Buddhist thought that will then enable oneself to not only think as how much is our thought important, but how much our thought with the actual Buddhist ideas and concepts being embedded in that will then enable us to become much more not only being able to have the ownership of our own thoughts, but also that the thing that we think is our thought has some sound and very sane rationale that actually makes our thought very thoughtful and sensible and hopefully useful. Because it's not the lack of thoughts, but most people have thoughts, but they're usually not so thoughtful, not so sensible, not so useful. And very soon after it is consummated. At the time when they have the thought, they thought that was the only idea that was relevant. So that's why it's very important to bring in some of the fundamental concept of Buddhist teachings. So first of all, when we say Buddhist, we're talking about the enlightened mind and experiences, the realization of the Buddha. So this thought of the Buddhist comes from the realizational experiences of the Shakyamuni Buddha. And therefore, his thought are regarded as omniscient thoughts. Yeah, so his thoughts are not seeing some apparent deluded reality that are colored by our karma and affliction, like most of our thoughts are. Nor are his thoughts just seeing only partially and not seeing the whole thing. So not seeing just some hidden phenomena, but his thoughts are fully enlightened. So therefore, his thought is omniscient and a penetrative insight. So therefore, we need to know that when we refer to Buddhist thought, this thought comes from Buddha's enlightenment. So enlightenment of Buddha's experience is that which discerns the nature of reality as it appears in the relative form and as it is in the ultimate level. So firstly, that we all have this thought about relative reality as they appear, and when we know that the way they appear to us are our own thoughts and not the objects, that's starting to have some kind of some understanding, subjective understanding. They are my thoughts. They are my thoughts about the objects. So apparent reality are mainly our thought about the objects. And so when we can see they are my thoughts, then at least we have less danger of thinking it is the object, identical to the object, which has a good step of being. We have actually some responsibility, saying they are my thought. So the object that looks like your thought is not identical to your thought. Object might be quite different from your thought of the object at all. So Buddha has this very distinctive awareness that the thought about the object are only thought about the object, but there is nothing in the object that is identical to the thought. Whereas we often do not have the benefit of knowing that is so. So in order to have a good, I would say, constitution in our mind to know that it is my own thoughts, you have to have certain degree of wisdom. These wisdom are 3 kinds: wisdom derived from listening, wisdom derived from contemplation, and wisdom derived from meditation. So the Buddha's wisdom is the wisdom derived from meditative realization of enlightenment. And now, if we have studied and heard the teachings quite a bit, which some of you have, you will have a considerable benefit of thinking by the power of conviction in the teachings, where you heard that the apparent reality of things are not are not identical to the object itself as it is. It's only very much kind of dictated and conditioned by our own afflictions or karmic preconditionings that our mind has. Therefore, our own thoughts and affliction and karmic habitual patterns are often making things look as they are the object, but they are actually very much colored by our own thoughts. So we have that kind of subjective cognition of our own thoughts, often obscuring the object's reality as it is. So when we have that, then we have at least what we call subjective awareness of our own, conditioned by our own habits and afflictions. Now, so the enlightened being not only have these all the time, but he knows the objects, particularly sentient beings, who they appear as to our mind. They see how their deluded mind fails to see those conditionings, and therefore not only has the wisdom, but also has compassion for what they do not see. Whereas when we as a deluded person, we know it is our own thought, but we still have a huge percentage of blame onto the other. As if the other wasn't there like that, it wouldn't manifest as even from our own conditioned mind. So we tend to have this still a very strong sense of resentment, as if the object's influence is far more outweighing the reality that appears to us than the reality it actually is. Because of that, we have the quarrel between us and our thoughts, So because we don't like to notice our deluded thoughts as obscure, that which obscures the object's reality, we think the object reality has its own share of of negative influence on us that actually makes us to not able to have the clarity of our mind. So we have this kind of a deficiency in us, not being able to fully fully take responsibility of how much is conditioned by our own karma and affliction. Whereas enlightened being not only has not only understand the relative reality it appears to our deluded mind, but also he knows that and ultimately that appearance in the object lack anything similar to the perception that sentient being has. So because of that, his omniscient mind gives him the compassion to pitifully see the plight of beings who do not see. Because of that, his mind of the enlightened, so the wisdom derived from the meditation has given enlightenment, as well as the compassion to see the plight of sentient beings who don't see it. So, for the sake of oneself, there is this wisdom discerning the lack of inherent existing on the object. But for the sake of the other sentient beings, there is compassion because they do not see the level that enlightened being can see. Because of that, the omniscience mind of the Buddha and the compassion mind is complementary. Whereas we, as ordinary being, until we have this strong sense of realization, we still have this quarrel of not being able to sit well with the discrepancy between our mind's obscuration and the objects say what you call unsupportive and uncooperative nature of the objects. So we still see a huge degree of the uncooperative nature of the object instigating us to be obscured and conditioned as we are, and therefore not quite being able to have the wisdom derived from meditation, let alone wisdom derived from, we might have some degree of wisdom derived from listening and contemplating, but there is no sufficient wisdom derived from meditation. Because wisdom derived from meditation gives us both the wisdom and compassion. Compassion wisdom for ourselves to restrain, and wisdom with which we survey the plight of beings who do not see that, and therefore compassion. So with these two, with the wisdom derived from meditation, one has wisdom to save oneself from reacting, to feel compassion for sentient beings, these two. And the third quality is the power. Power to impart compassionate emotion to the sentient beings, and because of that, the qualities of the Buddha are these three: omniscience, compassion, and wisdom. Sorry, power. Yeah, omniscience is the wisdom, and then compassion is the second quality. A third is the power. Power to be not intimidated by the uncooperative nature of sentient beings, yeah, and understanding their situation not only out of wisdom and compassion, but not to be overwhelmed by the sufferings of others, but one actually have ability to almost remedy the likelihood of being forgetting the union of compassion and wisdom. So what does this mean in relation to Buddhist thought? Means first of all Buddhists take refuge in the Buddha. So when we talk about refuge, we take refuge in the Buddha. Why we take refuge in the Buddha is Buddha are two types. One is the actual Buddha, the historical Buddha, to whose qualities we admire, we rejoice, we bow down. That's a relative refuge. But ultimate refuge is that we need to access these three qualities of wisdom, compassion, and power. Wisdom, compassion, and power. Yeah? When you have wisdom, compassion, power, then your Buddhist thought, then your thought of going for refuge, and not only going for refuge, but being in the refuge. Being in the refuge of witnessing sentient beings suffering, being with the sentient beings suffering, not overwhelmed by the sentient beings suffering, but one is able to transmit those three qualities: wisdom, compassion, and power. Wisdom, compassion, power. So when you have refuge, yeah. So a Buddhist person who has what makes them to be Buddhist is their refuge in the Buddha. Their refuge in the Buddha doesn't mean they quickly call the Buddha and Buddha appears out of the blue and then take away of your problems. He says, thank you. It's not like that. Whereas one actually subjectively access, you try to retrieve your wisdom, your compassion, and your power. Yeah. So your wisdom is the seeing the sentient beings and the conventional problem that you see, whatever that is, part of that might be your own karma, your own habit, and we are able to correctly accept your own karma and habits and affliction having contributed to the extent of the problem that you have at hand. So that kind of understanding most people don't have. They feel pain, they feel hurt, they feel upset by noticing their own habits and karma and affliction. Do you know what I mean? But here, those who have the Buddhist thought, their thought is now become very sensible and very, very sane to accept their own share of the suffering and habits and karma that has contributed to the share of the problem that actually exists. So that is the wisdom. Because of this wisdom, then there is the compassion towards oneself, one's past, and one's lingering habits of the past, as well as other sentient beings who are in a similar boat. Particularly they're in the more sort of leaky part of the boat. They're probably very drowned in the. So you develop the compassion to them more than you. What? And therefore you have the power to wash the suffering by your compassion and wisdom. And you do not quarrel and resist and desist the suffering. So what does this mean is that in Buddhism we usually talk about the four seals of dharma. The first seal of dharma is that accepting the life by nature is unsatisfactory or suffering. Yeah. So the nature of life is suffering. So Buddhist person must always remember this. He shouldn't forget, because it is all suffering. He shouldn't forget. You don't have to forget suffering, because there's suffering all over the place. we forget that we always want so much happiness. We forget it's always suffering. But when you remember it's always suffering, so the Buddhist person have this wisdom to know suffering as suffering, which is really good Buddhist. That's a really Buddhist person. He knows his suffering is suffering. So he doesn't complain he's suffering, because who you want to complain to? They also got their own suffering. So why snow under each other's suffering? And you actually literally accept your share of suffering, which you begin to see your suffering is considerably much more smaller than that of others, once you have this first seal of Buddhist thought, that life is suffering, Yeah? Not only while life is suffering, it says noble truth of suffering. It is not only life is suffering, but it is truth. It is fact. It is incontrovertibly true. Incontrovertibly true. Now, so that's the incontrovertible. Truth means incontrovertible, means it will never deceive you. It will never lead you down to disappoint you that life has no suffering, So only thing that we become disappointed is that we are not able to have that thought readily available. We haven't really downloaded that app yet, We have seen it on the advertisement occasionally, but we actually didn't download it fully. You have to download this first app. That life is suffering. It's very good. And you have life is suffering. What is life is suffering means the nature of life that is conditioned by karma and affliction is suffering. But you don't. If you say no, my life is not suffering, it's possible. Maybe you don't have karma and affliction. There might be some blue moons, some super full moon, blue moon that you happen to have no karma and affliction during that day, and you happen to have no suffering. But that's not usually the case. So the first Buddhist thought is that life is suffering. Why it makes a Buddhist is that you need to validate that as a truth that is incontrovertible. Incontrovertible means that will not be, you cannot invalidate it. You cannot invalidate it. So next time you have some suffering of any kind, you say, oh, this is nature of life, because this is part of life, It's like nature of water is fluid, nature of fire is burning, nature is nature of wind is movement, yeah. Nature of solid things is tangible and obstructable. Likewise, nature of life is suffering. So that's the first seal. Now, if you have this first seal, you have the seeing of the truth that is incontrovertibly golden, And when you see this truth, means that if you have conceived this Buddhist thought that life is suffering, then every time you see someone who's suffering, who's not coping with them, you develop compassion to them because they do not see the truth. They are arguing against the truth and fact of it, and they're going opposite direction. They're saying no, water shouldn't be wet, water should be dry. It's like they're arguing against the fact, So you will see a lot of people. Most people are complaining about suffering. Whenever somebody complaining, they're complaining suffering. They're saying, "Gosh, this water is so wet. Oh, this water is so wet. I've never seen any water so wet." just imagine that. That's quite insensible. That's quite illogical. So, one who understands life through the Buddha's wisdom of enlightenment, he discovered that suffering is the nature of life. So when we have refuge in the Buddha, we need to see why Buddha said the life is by nature unsatisfactory on the three reasons: the wisdom, compassion, and power. So we need to say why it is wisdom. Wisdom means it is always correct. Always correct. That nobody can invalidate it. And compassion means because it is so correct, because it is so bitter true, very few people can accept it. Therefore, you must practice compassion. So the people who can understand the bitter pill of the suffering, there are majority of sentient beings are those who cannot accept it because they deny the life as like that. And so therefore you have not only wisdom discerning that is the nature of a life, but also you have compassion for those who do not digest that at all. And unfortunate thing about them not digesting that thing is then it exacerbates, then it perpetuates the suffering. That self-perpetuation is called samsara. That self-perpetuation is suffering. They don't know. Their lack of this knowledge is perpetuating that, It's just like the dog who's trying to bite his itchy tip of his tail, He spins around. He spins. More he spins around, the less he get to eat, less he get to relieve his itchy tail, So after all, maybe about a few minutes going round, he gets dizzy and collapse. So samsara, sentient beings are always suffering because they don't know the nature of life is unsatisfactory because they are mostly conditioned by one's own karma and affliction, which they do not know they are doing, so they are very unconscious. So they unconsciously create suffering and they perpetuate that even more. And because you know these two, the first is wisdom, second is have compassion for those who do not see. Wisdom to accept your share of suffering, and therefore you do not complain and react, and you don't go and bite the tip of your tail anymore. So, I'm sorry about giving the analogy of dog because the dog is so cute, He's so hitchy. Your only dog is so cute. He's very smart. But when he's got itchy tail, he doesn't know what to do. He just spins around. And he thinks he can bite his tail and relieve the scratch, itch, but he doesn't. The more he runs, the less he catches to relieve the itch, and then he just spins and he just dizzy and collapses. So sentient beings are all perpetuating in the vicious cycle and then falling all over the place. And so you have to have the Buddhist thought to fellow sentient beings who do not see it. You need to impart them compassion. Okay, that's the compassion aspect of it. This is the refuge in the Buddha. Yeah, refuge in the Buddha makes you to have this emotional and intellectual intelligence and fitness to think this way, the wisdom, and emotionally impart compassion to them, not feel impatient and irritated by sentient beings, unruliness, and like that, which a lot of people like that. They think they're really relatively calm in person, but they can't stand someone who's not calm, So how can you prove that you are calm unless you deal with some agitated sentient beings? So you have to have the power to overcome this restless and agitated sentient beings' behavior with your compassion, with your wisdom, and then not intimidated by their sufferings, by their reactions, and you still unconditionally impart wisdom and compassion. As a result of that, now you have the Buddhist thought. Do you have refuge in the Buddha? Yeah, you have refuge. Why do you know that you have refuge? Refuge means safety. You didn't react. You didn't overreact. Thank goodness. Or you reacted. Maybe you can say, I shouldn't have reacted. That's good to know. Good to know that you react when you shouldn't have reacted. Because that's the beginning part of it. And then next time you wouldn't react at all. Why? Because you had the power what's called self-control. Self-controlling one's own habits, one's own affliction, one's own thoughts, one's own opinions, and try not to add it or react it. So last week we talked about being able to pause for a cause. Yeah, you cannot, most people want to pause, but they don't have the power to pause. They don't have the power to pause. So you need the power. So what is the pause? Refuge. Yeah, you have to have the refuge. When the Buddhist person has a refuge, it doesn't mean that Buddha sent his holy soldiers to you, save you. I mean, your conscious mind, in that wisdom mind and compassion mind, then controls your behavior, verbal behavior, physical behavior, emotional behavior, and therefore you are able to pause them, meaning control them. Self-control is highest control, Self-control is highest control. And we were talking last week that why are we always repeating same habits and we're not being able to change? It's because we are not learning to recognize the onslaught of the habit about to launch, about to attack, about to react. When you can see that, then practice kindness. Have the wisdom that if I react this way, the consequences will be very damaging and destructive. So I rather practice the safety. Refuge means safety. So this is what we're talking right now is how does the refuge, as a Buddhist thought, becomes functional for a person who is thinking Buddhistically because he ascribed to the Buddhist thought of particularly refuge. He doesn't only say the refuge prayer 3 times before his practice or meditation, but he actually practiced the refuge whenever necessary, You should always put the seat belt on before you drive, isn't it? So you should always you should always have the seat belt on. Seat belt on, so that means you take refuge in the Buddha. Take refuge in the Buddha means you walk a safe path. Safe path is self-control. When you can control self habits and thoughts and behaviors, this self-control is what we call the power. The power that comes from your meditation, power that came from your listening, power that came from your contemplation has now given you the power to self-control. Self-control means you're able to prevent producing any sufferings in the future. You may have to tolerate some temporal difficulties now, but you have the compassion and wisdom to be able to do that. Because you have the compassion and wisdom to do it now, therefore you have power to tolerate the temporal difficulties now, which you see very fittingly as the extermination of the past karma that is ripening rather than escalating, letting it to become escalated due to lack of self-control. So because of that, the Buddhist thought, firstly, for a person who takes refuge in the Buddha, we must say, okay, one who has refuge in the Buddha, how does he convert, how does he modify his behavior? By resorting to these three qualities of wisdom, compassion, and power. When you have this, then the refuge is no longer then the refuge becomes not some prayer you say at the beginning. Refuge becomes your behavior. Your behavior becomes non-violent to you, your future, to the sentient being, to their future. So what does it, when you have a lot of aggressive mentality, but you are learning to control it, try to sort of diffuse that. You try to become turn aggression into compassion and non-violent. Then, of course, it is very, very safe. It's a refuge means that you're not causing any injury or harm by your reaction or overreaction at all. The likelihood of reaction or overreaction is eliminated. That elimination is waking up. That's waking up from the slumber of what we usually do not know that we are about to do. So when you increase your sensibility and I would say and thoughtfulness, you can see later on, oh, I'm so glad. Today I really practiced refuge in the Buddha. Today I really became a little bit like Buddha-like, a little bit like awakening. Buddha-like. There was a little bit awakening, There was a waking up. You truly rose today. You truly grew today. You truly emotionally and spiritually have a little bit of upliftment because you were able to conquer your habits and you were able to chip away the little bit of negative habits that usually don't have the, you don't have the correct chisel or you don't have the correct tool. But today you succeeded to do that. Why? You were reading, you're listening, and you are meditating. And from these three, small trickle of wisdom is now starting to, give some blissful kind of flavor. There's a sweet victory of the self-control, sweet victory of self-control, and you feel so. If somebody did that to you, we thank them. Wait until you do it yourself. And I'm sure there will be amazing hug you get from yourself. oh, thank you so much. I've been wanting you to do this so long, and I finally get it. Just imagine that. And you get yourself look in your own eyes, say thank you, my dear. We're always looking for someone to do the things to make us pleased, make us helped, but we want ourselves to do that. When you see that, there will be when the Buddha is the one who's victorious. So when you have refuge, you have to have small victories, don't you think? Don't you think we have to have small victories, If you have an argument with somebody, you score a few points. That's not victory, okay? That's not victory. That's ego. That's a loss. So small victories that you actually were able to control your thoughts. Even you have a perception of someone like that, you straight away say, oh, that's your projection, that's not him. Very good, straight away. And you can, as soon as you agree to that, you straight away retract that projection. Very good. Retract that projection and see whether you can put a clean film. New film. New film. Very good. You can put a new film and you can see the object quite differently. Yeah, very good. Once you have that, that's I want to talk about this tonight. How the suffering become accepted out of wisdom, compassion, and power. When you have that ability to accept the suffering as the first fact or truth, then you come to the second seal of dharma. Is that all things are impermanent. Oh, that's even better. That's even better. even sufferings, even the life's nature is suffering, but even life itself is impermanent. Let alone, so how could the nature of life be? Nature of life always be unsatisfactory because life itself is impermanent. If you don't perpetuate the same life caused by conditioned by affliction and habit, of course it can be more you decrease the affliction and habit into your life. Therefore, you can see the duration of your life, duration of sufferings are much more temporary and transient. So now this is the second layer, okay? Second layer that makes your wisdom a little bit more wiser. On top of thinking everything is suffering, second, on top of that, your wisdom is that, but everything is also impermanent. Oh, thank goodness. That's like icing on the cake, So, icing on the cake, everything is impermanence. Even good things, don't get attached to them. Even difficult things, don't develop aversion to them. You should let go. You should change your thought about them. So everything is impermanent means. So when you have wisdom that not only life is unsatisfactory, but all the unsatisfactories of life are also impermanent. So it means you can have varieties of unsatisfactoriness in relation to each of the sense objects and sense organs and your thoughts and your opinions, your behaviors, your physical, your verbal, your mental, your emotion. all kinds of. Some people are much more able to cope physical problems. Some people can withstand a lot of emotional problems, but physically they can't cope with it. So you can see that even sufferings are many kinds. Not only sufferings are impermanent, but suffering themselves are many kinds. So there are suffering of change, and all pervasive conditioning suffering. All pervasive conditioning suffering. So usually we are always complaining about suffering of change. And now, when you know that suffering of change is very much every day to day. Like said, if the temperature is too high, we say it's too high, and can you please turn it down? When it's cold, we say, oh, it's too low. Can you please raise up? So that kind of physical temperature, or temperature in the room, or whatever it is, you can basically remote control a lot of the sufferings, Don't you think? Climatically controlled rooms, So the climate-related suffering can be controlled remotely, yeah. But suffering caused by all conditioning, I am, and that you can't control remote. You don't have a remote control for that. So those are not conditionable by using devices and so on. So that's why we have to now develop the wisdom of how impermanent the all things are, including us, suffering, people, and the things people do to each other. And so when you know how everything is very transient and impermanent, it's not because they're mean to us they change that way. If you know that everything is transient, even somebody says, I don't love you anymore, I'm going to leave tomorrow, sorry about that. If they said that, you don't get disappointed. You really, that's the nature of unsatisfactoriness. So you thought you were going to have a very cozy relationship. All of a sudden they announce you, look, I'm having had enough of you, Look, please, don't think I love you anymore. Actually, I started to hate you, so please give me a break. I'm leaving you. If they said that, you won't be disappointed. Why? Because everything's impermanent. Very good. See, previously you're enjoying suffering. You're enjoying suffering as happiness. This is the problem. So we still didn't know it was suffering. We thought it was happiness, but we said there is no real happiness. So there are temporal pleasures, but temporal pleasures would be sufferings. Particularly if we get attached to them. So when things change, which are momentary and day to day and around the clock things change. And when a person is now having developed that, let's go back to the 3 points, the wisdom, compassion, and power in relation to impermanence. When you boost your wisdom with realizing everything is impermanent, then you realize, everything is impermanent. It's not his fault leaving me. It's that me not digesting the impermanence of things. Just I'm not educated enough. I'm not educated enough to think that everything is impermanent, because this world thinks everything's permanent. They all apply for permanent job even though it's impermanent. They get into relationship even though it's impermanent. They think it's permanent. They all get the wrong ideas in their head. But the Buddhist thought try to switch the program. Try to download everything's impermanent program, Now try to download the app called Everything's Impermanent. Very good. Previously we download everything's suffering, Life is suffering. Now even sufferings are impermanent. Not to mention pleasures, not to mention health, not to mention status, not to mention healthy, not to mention harmony, not to mention success, not to mention all the things. Everything is impermanent. Buddha was so confident that all things are impermanent. Amazing. Who can say that? Who can say that? You're going to sort of spoil everybody's party if you say that. When the Buddha said everything is impermanent, it's like a roaring truth. It's another one of those incontrovertible truths. Incontrovertible truth. That's what we call Buddhist seals. They're not breakable seals. They're so true. When everything is impermanent, when you really truly conceive that, the wisdom, realizing everything is impermanent, allow you to practice detachment, letting go, forgive, and move on. Because when you don't comprehend or remember that everything is impermanent, you think it's your fault. You think it's your friend's fault. You think it's because they did the deliberate to you, and then you try to quarrel and you perpetuate the suffering even more. You know? You see what I mean? But if you have this, if you truly have this Buddhist thought, yes, everything is impermanent, you can really engrave these 4 C's of Dharma in gold, you know, and put put on each of the four walls of each room those four bumper stickers, you know. Life is unsatisfactory on one wall, maybe in the eastern wall. In the southern wall, you can put all things are impermanent. Very good. Everything is impermanent. So when you have this composition of knowing everything is impermanent, your wisdom means your wiseness, your skillfulness increases to know everything is impermanent. When everything is impermanent, then you do not get attached to power or success or friendship or health or status or material possessions or whatever. When you lose them, you do not suffer because you'll suffer because you're attached to them thinking they're permanent when they're not. So it's good to know, it is impermanent. So it's wisdom. It's a wisdom to know it is impermanent. But when we hear the word impermanent, which if you look at most of the English literature, you read a book, the word impermanence hardly features. It doesn't feature. It doesn't feature because they can't stand it. They can't stand the truth. Most people don't like to hear the truth, you see. That's so bitter, so bitter. But if you really understand the truth, you accept it, then when things do change, which is not periodical, things change momentarily. You know, so it doesn't come to you as a shock. And you actually anticipated that your job not to be last, your relationship not to last, even if it lasts, but it isn't the same thing, you know. It's not the same thing, you know. So it's not fault of you, not fault of your mother or your husband or your daughter or your boss or no. It's just nature of all things impermanent. When you have this, this gives you makes you to become wise. What does the wisdom do? Wisdom makes you to have intelligent emotions, and therefore you can control the destructive emotions from having their say on you. You see what I mean? So where does the self-control comes? You need the wisdom. You need someone else to give you advice how not to feel emotionally hurt or cheated or suffer loss or betrayal. In English they use all this heavy bombastic word, you know, betrayal, you know. They think it's all bad because of the other person doing to you, you know. They say betrayed. They put the word betrayed and they think you are the ultimate victim of what somebody did. They don't realize it is nature of the impermanence. So none of these heavy bombastic words will conjure up in your mind when you have the magic word impermanent. Everything is impermanent. When you do that, when you have the impermanent, then not only it is wisdom for you, but it is cause for you to develop compassion to those who don't see it. Yeah? Okay, so the other people are rolling up and down and carrying on, reacting, and then you see, because they don't see everything is impermanent, therefore they're attached. They thought this will last for 10 years when it's actually only 3 years. You know? Even some people do the building job or whatever, they will give you guarantee, maybe 12 months guarantee. But it's only 12-month guarantee. Even that, it's going to cost a bit. If it's a 6-month guarantee, maybe that, maybe two makes you. If you want to extend to 2 years, you pay another $300. In Buddhism, we don't extend warranty. There's no extension of warranty. Just don't delude each other thinking it's going to last longer than they do. It only means they'll come and fix the thing that will break down. It doesn't mean that your things will not break. It means your things is ever unsatisfactory, but we will come and fix it, because if you pay $300, we'll come and fix it. Whether it breaks or not, you got to pay it. So, see, the wisdom is very, very expensive. It's not $300. This is amazing comprehension with the intelligent emotion, they call it. Intelligent emotion and what they call that emotional literacy, by which you're able to make yourself able to read your mind. As a result of that, then you are able to impart compassion to your past sufferings. Like, say, you didn't cope in the past like this anymore, and then now you can really free yourself from that upset as a result of that. And not only that, you also can impart that compassion to someone in your life, or family, or circle of friends. They cannot cope. You don't feel they are difficult to you. Their difficulties, or they're not being able to help them, you realize this is the greatest opportunity for you to practice the refuge in the dharma. Dharma means realizational dharma. You have to realize what you have to do, even though it is hard to do. Even though it's hard to do, how to conquer your pride, how to conquer your neurosis, how to tame other unruly people. They're so spoiled by their karma and afflictions. And of course, we cannot, even as the big brother, maybe you are the very loved brother or sister or husband or wife or friend or by others, but even you could not help them to tell. Even though you tell them, they just don't hear it. They don't hear it. Why? They don't hear it doesn't mean that you should give up on. You should have power to endure that realization, and not give up on sentient beings. So this is where how do you use the power of your compassion, wisdom. Do not let yourself to be intimidated or give up on sentient beings. You might have to take a little half an hour break from reacting. Maybe don't say anything in the half an hour, but give yourself some clarity to regather your power. Because we also misplace our keys and all the things like that. We had a couple of keys, but we don't have them here when we need it. So you have to sit down and reflect a little bit, maybe mumble some prayers, maybe even do the refuge prayer a few rounds, and all of a sudden your mental clarity will regain its conscience. As a result of that, you now find, yes, you actually have the power to control your thoughts, control your behaviors, control your emotions, because you're able to prevent the karma and affliction from escalating from your own end. That power, therefore, increases and boosts your ability to practice compassion to other sentient beings. Because of that, refuge in the Buddha has now become refuge in the Dharma. The Dharma is the realizational refuge. Realizational refuge is that you realize how true the teaching is and then practice it. And then you realize, this is how Buddha attained the ultimate realization. And even your small steps, you have a little sort of inkling. You have some small insight that you gain, and of how sacred and precious the Dharma is, particularly when you get to implement it yourself, in so far as implementing the wisdom, compassion, and power. Now, power doesn't mean here to some kind of suppress other people. Power here means how to quell your own afflictions and your suffering of all conditional existence. why this is happening to me? You don't say that anymore. If you don't ring your another elder Dharma brother and say, why this is happening to me, Rinpoche? I can't stand this anymore. You might even call me, that's fine. I'll say, oh gosh, I'm glad you called me. I mean, we both have to all come to realize these things. So sometimes you need to compare your notes, and all of a sudden you just go back and rehash your thoughts, and then don't think that's all there is, because we have this very strong obsession to get it fixed now and right there. We are not able to accept our incapacity. So we should sometimes just take refuge, means surrender. Take refuge means not always trying to get it right. Just admit what you can't do, and we say, look, I have to surrender, surrender to the truth teaching, even though I can't get it right. I will surrender. If you put the white flag, they wouldn't shoot you, I'm told. So put the refuge up, put the white flag up. They will not shoot at you. I'm sorry, I'm not up to it. When you have that kind of humility, that's power. That's power. So when you have this realization, this is the realization that will boost your refuge in the Buddha. Why? Even refuge in the Buddha is more validated again and again by the time you realize the truthfulness of Dharma, how true the Dharma is. And your ability to practice them and overcome some of your own neurotic behaviors and attitudes and so on. When you're able to see that truth, then you can see how incontrovertible, how non-deceptive the truth is, how it will not let you down, meaning that the Tibetan word for truth is miluwa. Miluwa means it will not deceive you. So, incontrovertible truth, And so when you know everything is, life is impermanent, and all things are, life is suffering, all things are impermanent, then even the people, you do not lump him from yesterday years or 2 years of what did he do to you or to somebody. You don't lump him anymore like that. You think that he's not him anymore. We shouldn't lump people with what they did 2 years ago or what they didn't do 2 years ago. Because if you do that, that's the problem. You have this fixed hat. You put this black hat on somebody that you put on 2 years ago, you still see him always with that hat, poor man. Come on, give him a break. Give him a break. Tell him, I've taken off your black hat. Come on, you are now good. Come over here. If you did that, you have realized impermanence because you have changed your attitude towards somebody. You no longer see him or her with their particular suffering or problem they committed then, unfortunately, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, maybe even to ourselves, We should give ourselves a break. You don't lump yourself, I'm like this, I was like this 10 years ago, I will never recover, I'm so sad. People are belting themselves. We should take off the hat that we used to put or other people used to put and say, I have refuge. Now I have this kind of seals of Dharma. They're like gems that people wear lots of things on a neck as necklace. You have put gems on your neck, Now we are wearing the necklace of Dharma, so that we are actually ornamented to not forget the teachings. When you have this, then you have the realization of Dharma. So that's real refuge. We talk about doing refuge 100,000 times, 21 times. Those are religiously doing. But you need to be practically, sensibly, thoughtfully, and logically useful refuge, which is realization of Dharma. You're almost validating the truthfulness of Dharma. You see how true the Dharma is, how medicine the Dharma is. See, medicine is that cures this illness, isn't it? So the Dharma mentally reconstitute your mind from poor me mentality to we're no longer having poor me, and how dare he do that to me, that kind of attitude. You no longer see that. You don't lump yourself or others with their certain behaviors, actions, wrongs one or they have committed. You see them as something then, and now we have changed. As a result of these, then we come to the when you have this second seal of dharma, which is everything is impermanent, and you have wisdom, compassion, and power. So power means to move on, and then next one is so then when we talk about, so that's the true refuge. Refuge in the Buddha is like that. Refuge in Dharma. Third is refuge in the sangha. Refuge in the sangha means usually sangha gives you advice. Now you are going to give yourself the advice. You are so helpful to yourself. You are saying, oh, thank you. You are thanking you, thanking me. Who is thanking who? You actually feel yourself thanking yourself for the study you are doing, for the meditation you are doing, for the contemplating you are doing, listening you are doing, and comparing note you are doing. And as a result of doing these things, you have now increased. You have boosted your growth in the last 2 weeks or 2 years or 2 days much more than you did in 20 years of search. So there is that kind of instantaneous, I would say, confidence, boosting, that you become the sangha that you lacked in you. That's very good. That's a good one. Oh, you found a friend in you. You found a friend that understands you, pardons you, forgives you, encourages you. This is the sangha. Sangha has two qualities, by the way. Sangha has two qualities. One is knowledge, another is liberation. Now you have this self-realization knowledge. You have this. That's why people spend maximum time in meditation and prayer, so that they can see. So they see the knowledge of the Dharma, the truthfulness of knowledge of the Dharma. The more you know this, more you are able to grow intellectually and emotionally and spiritually, not just intellectually, but behaviorally also. You actually see yourself shifting. Your attitude is shifting. As a result of that, your physical behavior, as a result of that, the language in which you're thinking are now shifting and changing. And this kind of self-realization gives you the liberation. Liberation is the sangha liberates you. They say sangha is the rescuer. And when you do not need some monk or nun or senior practitioner always to tell you something, they can only tell you, but you still have to do it yourself, you know. How many times we need to call them all the time, you know? Later on they say, come on, this is about time you did yourself, my dear, you know. It's just like someone who have taught you how to fix some computer problems. You never seem to be learning. You even 20 times, you're still asking them same question. They say, come on, this is about time you need to know how to fix yourself. It's like that. It's like that. So we have to discover the wisdom of the good sangha in you, okay, and compassion of the senior sangha in you, okay, the power of the senior sangha in you that makes you to feel woken up in a rig. And the second is dol, means liberate. So you're aware and you're somewhat much more changed and transformed. When people witness these three qualities, that's a refuge. You know, because they are resorting to these three qualities of compassion, wisdom, and power of the Buddha. When you do that, then what does the quality of the Dharma does? Then it will make you to become peaceful. You know, you become peaceful. You become internally very peaceful and have very little conflicts and argument, even with others, let alone with yourself. You know. So it's very good. So all the arguments is very clarified in the meditation. So do some, if you do prayer and learning and reading and meditation, quite a lot of the wranglings and so a lot of the murky things in your mind become so clarified in the meditation. Why? Dharma is peace. Dharma makes you peaceful. You know, that the Buddha's teaching helps you to pacify, purify your mind. And the purifier is your conscious implementation of these ideas of compassion, wisdom, and power. When you implement the compassion and wisdom and power, this is why in Mayan Buddhism you have the three bodhisattvas. Avalokiteshvara is compassion, Manjushri is the wisdom, Vajrapani is the power. So we call the three bodhisattvas. The three bodhisattvas are not some bodhisattva who come and aid, assist you. These are just three symbols, three sort of reminders not to forget our own wisdom, compassion, and power, and that we need to empowered. We need to be empowered by having refuge. What does refuge do? Refuge saves you from trouble. What saves us from trouble? Not some holy Buddha coming through your ceiling and take you out of the suffering or whatever. Not that kind of thing. Not that. Don't seek those kind of a theistic kind of savior coming from the ceiling when you're meditating on the Buddha. Buddha also come through the ceiling and he smiles you and he winks at you or something like that. People tell that kind of stories. I say, oh, that's really cultural Buddhism. I say, don't wait to write your biography with that kind of stories, okay? All the pre-16th century Tibetan Buddhist biographies all like that, you know. I used to feel in the maybe 30 years ago, I thought, wow, that's amazing. Wow. Now, His Holiness Dalai Lamas keep reminding, be a 21st century Buddhist, be a 21st century Buddhist. So it means that you should look transformative, subjective experiences, not this kind of esoteric, you know, neither here nor there, kind of airy-fairy kind of supernatural experiences. These are not Buddhism, you know. These are sort of moving into some shamanistic Buddhism. Shamanistic Buddhism of the Bonpo and all that kind of magic and mystery in Tibet, okay? Now we're talking about wisdom and compassion and power in Tibet. We're not talking about magic and mystery. You know? So when you have this, then it doesn't matter, you cannot find someone that you can really put your faith or follow someone, even as a great teacher. You can't follow them. They say, wait until you don't have to follow anybody but the truth. Yeah, the truth is the dharma. Because dharma, even someone teaches you, they teaches you to follow the truth, not them. If anybody teaches to follow people, they are not Buddhism. That's why Tibetan Buddhism got a little bit of image problem of having to follow your Lama. And therefore they give the Lamaism. It's not following the Lama. Lama himself is a follower. He's another follower who's limping himself, you know. So don't follow limping one's direction. He has a problem on top of the limp. So don't follow people. That's the Buddha said. Don't follow the person, but the dharma. Rely on the dharma, not the person. This is very important, you know. Why? How do you know? Most of the time people are following people because they need theoretical guidance, oral teachings, concepts and ideas. What is this? What is this not? That's not the person you follow. That's just the instructor. This instructor simply teach you the recipe, you know. But he doesn't necessarily cook that all the time himself either, you know. I mean, don't you think that all the people who are doing a lot of cooking shows, do you think they cook that much and eat every day? No. Hope that then they will be not walking. They'll be eating too much all the cookings. So don't follow the people. Follow the truth. You know, if you have stopped following people but starting to follow the Dharma, then you have become Buddhist. But until then, quite a lot of people, even they say, oh, such and such is high master. He's the 13th reincarnation. He's the highest one. He's the second highest. People say these things, and then we put so much emphasis on people and not on the Dharma, and that's Lamaism. So, of course we don't have to, because His Holiness Dalai Lama, who's the top Lama, says don't follow that. Of course, I'm just one of the among the crowd down listening to His Holiness. So of course I'm just repeating what he says, But other Tibetans give the impression that you have to follow a lineage or something, and the Lama or his lineage or something. That's not Buddhism. Buddhism is to break all the barriers, break all these barriers and fixed identities. Try to go beyond the individualism. Try to increase your comprehension of how to have wisdom, compassion, and power to use these two in every situation, and therefore do not get defeated by karma and afflictions and all the conditioning that we encounter in life, but yourself having some degree of constitution that you actually find. So what we have covered tonight is, how does a Buddhist person subscribe to the triple gem as we traditionally take refuge, and then what does that taking refuge means? They actually subscribe. They put a signature. They say, I do. I do means I believe the Buddha, that all life is unsatisfactory. So you put a signature there. And the second is, everything is impermanent. Oh, yes, you put a signature, everything is impermanent. So it means next time you will not complain when things change, So you need to put your signatory to these seals. You put your signature you don't put the signature unless you're gonna honor that. So that means so Buddhists have to remember the signature they put, and their refuge they put, and so therefore they must learn how not to transgress that. These are all intellectual, emotional things. We're not talking about conventional precepts. Conventional precepts are don't do this, don't do this. Of course, these things are outer behavioral precepts. But main thing is that how does one actually intellectually and conceptually digest the Buddha's wisdom, for such as these first two. We just discussed these first two tonight, because these two are more important. You can't talk about the other two. We will talk about later. But first we need to truly, not only intellectually comprehend, but emotionally, relate to the Buddha, what it means that the life is suffering, and you accept that. So life is suffering. What does life is suffering means is that is the nature of life. And so how do you know that you have accepted life as suffering? You will get by with all the suffering, but you don't think this is right way, that is wrong way. You don't get caught up in this duality. You try to make whatever adaptations or whatever compromise you make, but you don't make yourself or others being one is right, one is wrong eternally. There is nothing that is right or wrong. Everything is only dependent. So when you know that everything is dependent, and therefore, if you look from this point of view, this is right. If you look from that point of view, that is right. So you will look from my point of view, you are you. From your point of view, I'm you. So it's like that. So therefore we are able to see from the different points of view. In doing so, we are much more tolerant with the different views. Very good. So we are able to tolerate the difficulties, because when you accept the difficulties, then the difficulties actually make you to practice compassion. If you do not accept difficulties, when are you going to practice compassion? Compassion is got no job if you don't want to practice with difficulties. Compassion is the rescuer with dealing with difficult karma, difficult people, difficult behaviors, whatever that are. It is those difficult sentient beings we have to practice compassion. We don't say, oh, you're another unsatisfactory person, you're another unsatisfactory person, and then get rid of everybody, So we have to embrace the sufferings. We have to embrace the suffering sentient beings and their problems, and then try to find the compassion. See, the compassion is the remedy to the wisdom, to the knowledge of the life. Nature of life is unsatisfactory, and most sentient beings are not coping with it because they don't have the merit, they don't have the refuge, they don't have the comprehension to accept that, and therefore they don't realize their own reaction or their own response is actually perpetuating the very suffering they don't know, they don't want, or they don't know. And because of that, you have compassion for what they do not know. Because of that, your ability to have this Buddhist thought, it is not just you're subscribing to some kind of sets of Buddhist thoughts that you subscribe to, but deep down you don't know why it is, why you do, because the Buddhist beliefs. So it shouldn't be just a belief. So people say, oh, we believe that, but they don't realize why they believe that. So you got to validate that. You got to validate that until it is painfully true and usefully implementable. When you did implement, it was such a relief, such a relief to know how to do that. Previously you were just believing it. Now when you do it, it was painful, but it was good pain. Previously you always rejected pain as that's going to avoid you from having to go through pain. That's why we say, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. So when you see the truth of the pain, then you do not become childish in rejecting it. Because if you're rejecting it, you're reduplicating it, you're exacerbating it, then becomes suffering of suffering. So then becomes so perpetuate. Suffering of suffering means suffering creates more suffering. You don't want the suffering, but you, by the very nature with which you react, makes the suffering even doubled and tripled, And when one doesn't know that, you can see how unconscious our reactions are, and let alone the cause and effect of it. We don't realize our reaction is going to cause more suffering than you are actually able to cope right now. But one who has the ability to understand the cause and effect, he tolerates the present suffering in order to prevent future suffering. Very good. It's very good. If he thinks he needs a bit of future because everybody is so good at ensuring money for the future they may not have, They have life insurance, but in the meantime they're not living the life, I don't know when they will start living when they get the insurance money. That sort of insurance is not really insurance. But the refuge is very practical insurance. Very practical insurance. It is actually enabling you to deal with the difficulties. If it's difficulty and hard, it will purify your past karma. And you've got to believe in that. And you've got to see why it happens. And it does purify, because treatment hurts, Treatment hurts, People don't go for treatment because it's enjoyable, They don't say, oh, I want to go have a dental surgery today. I really like being under those tools of the dentist. I pay him $300 every half an hour or whatever. I really enjoy being. Nobody goes in treatment for the enjoyment. So dharma is a treatment. It's a very precious treatment. Dharma is precious, It's a sacred treatment. It is treating your mind and treating your thinking, treating your attitudes, not treating just one of the 32 teeth, If you treat one teeth today, but how about the others, You still got another problem. But if you treat the mind, there's not another mind you have to treat, If you treat the mind, maybe even all the 32 teeth are treated with it, Very good. I don't think Buddha had any dental appointment in his life. When Buddha passed away, remember, every tooth of him became a relic because none of them have been removed by dentist. Buddha let the truth be the truth they were. And so when you treat the mind, very painful, yeah. Then whole body become relic. The Buddha body, whole body become relic because his practice is completely treated. So the Dharma is the medicine. And so when you practice it with your person or with someone may be really difficult, but it is during the difficulty we can really grow and we can really evolve and unfold in a way that you never thought was possible. So the fundamental aspect of Buddhist thought is subscribing. And subscribing means taking refuge. Refuge in the Buddha and the Dharma and Sangha, this triple gem. But one shouldn't think this as only as a traditional religious Buddhist behaviors practicing refuge concerned, Then it teaches you, do this, visualize this, say this many times, do physically like that, verbally like that, visualize like that. Of course, these are the religious way of going for refuge, So how long do you spend doing refuge, for instance? But I believe that refuge is not only when you're doing refuge, but the rest of the life. So therefore, you've got to constitute your mind how to make the teaching relevant and teaching you, Teaching is teaching you. That's that's the very practice. Teaching is teaching you and teaching you. And if somebody is teaching you how to be a kind of builder, after 7 years of apprentice, you know how to do. Likewise, you should teach how the Dharma is teaching you and showing you how to cure your mind, how to understand your mind, how to understand some sentient beings with suffering, with karma, with affliction, and you need to be very, 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 very dedicated to help the sentient being who have these difficulties. So we need to be taught by the life experiences with the theoretical instructions and formal practice of the refuge and the Dharma that we do, we repeat, we recite, we sit down in a particular posture, we say the particular number of times, we put particular feelings when we're reciting the practice, and when you're starting to implement the teachings, then it is really teaching you. It is teaching you to see that you previously didn't. You were looking at it, but you never saw it. You were listening to it, but you never heard it before. Now, the teaching is really making you to see that you previously looked, but you didn't have the careful way to notice what it really was that it's showing you. Previously, you were listening to it, but you weren't really hearing it deep down. Now, that Dharma, that Buddhist thought, is becoming your thought. And as a result of that, you have a kind of perception of the Buddhas. Sometimes you have you can see everything from the point of view of Buddha mind. It's very nice to see it from Buddha mind, I mean, it's like having only one pair of binoculars and everybody can I have a look here? Oh, very lovely. Can I have a look? Everybody passing the binoculars, Now, this is not single binocular, Once you finish downloading the app, you start putting that and you look at that people or those stories with this kind of practitioners kind of look from the right view of the Buddha's mind and right attitude from the Buddha's mind, and then you start seeing these, and then you can see how much the kind of emotional compassion that you feel and pour to the plight of sentient beings. And by the time you're able to do that, your own share of historical problems or sufferings, the habits that you might still have a little bit lingering, you see them as minuscule, almost negligible in relation to suffering and problems of other sentient beings. Because of that, you have this amazing kind of a fitness, word Buddha means muni. Muni means someone who's able. He's so fit. He is so fit that he can now cope with these difficulties. His fitness is such that he can climb 2,000 ladders, 2,000 steps and get on top without any problem. So like that, you have this fitness to relate with sentient beings and their karma, and not to become angry by them, agitated by them, disappointed by them, betrayed by them, or no, deceived by them. You don't think like that anymore. Now you are indomitable. Shakyamuni Buddha was indomitable. He was not waverable. He was like a mountain. The wind blowing. Maybe the cyclone Tracy comes this way, cyclone Joseph comes that way, cyclone, all the names I can tell. In Australia, all the cyclones names after people, I couldn't believe it. The mountain is still there, no matter how many cyclones took many roofs away, many buildings collapsed, the mountains never move, like that. You got to stay like that. So that is the Muni. The Muni is the indomitable. Indomitable meaning cannot be shaken, cannot be moved. Why? Because you have this power. Power. When Buddha was attacked by the Maras night before he was enlightened, they hurl all kinds of weapons and so on. And no matter what temptation, what kind of problems that people were instigating him, he never swayed this way too much or that way too much. He stayed very steady. And that's the Muni. Muni means able. One is completely fit and able to remain. And when we have refuge, we must have that kind of prayer and aspiration. Even small steps, incrementally day by day, as you begin to practice these things. So we got a few minutes before we finish. If anyone has any pressing comments or out of compassion, comments out of compassion for yourself and others, please feel free to do so. That is the privilege the Zoom audience have. I'm sure Facebook's audience will benefit from that. So if so, put your Anybody got question? Yes, there is a comment here. Because of autism, I need to consciously work on empathy, which is not native to me. Because of obsessive compulsive disorder, I need to consciously work on not overreacting. That's a very good point, Brian. But you see, when we talk about autism or obsessive compulsive disorder, samsara is by definition obsessive compulsive disorder. So we shouldn't think only those people who are diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder are the one who has this. Samsara basically means vicious cycle. What is vicious cycle? Obsessive compulsive disorder. If not this, it's something else. So therefore, it's very important to empathize with others and not think I'm among the few, I'm among the minority who have this kind of situation. But recognizing the need to having this conscientious empathy for others, we need to learn, because like I was saying before, we are all in the same boat, but we don't realize others are already knee deep in the water. We are just having our ankle deep water and we think that's terrible. But you wouldn't believe others who've been under the water over their knees for days and days. So then it wouldn't be too difficult for us to empathy for others, because then we realize that others have been in that problem much longer. So we, in these kind of situations, are so familiar with just me. We're so used to thinking of I and me. And this is the point we will talk about next week, how to go beyond the idea of me, I am, or my concerns. Hello, everyone. Well, so it looks like we're going to conclude here. Thank you, everybody, for actively participating in these teachings on Friday nights. This is the second. We will be doing another 2 more in next 2 Fridays. And just a reminder, tomorrow not tomorrow, on Sunday, I will be doing the same on this same system on the Zoom and Facebook, teaching on the life of the Buddha, which is a series of talk I've been doing. We will be doing that also Sunday, 11 o'clock. So some of you might join me then. Anyway, thank you very much. Take care, everyone. Keep subscribing to those points. Okay, thank you.